Hi everybody, Bearded Rogue here, and today I'm doing my top games of 2017. I will be doing a top 10 list, however I'm going to talk about more than just 10, both because I had all sorts of problems narrowing it down, and because I want to mention some games specifically that didn't make my top 10. So, first things first, what you are not going to see on this list, simply because I haven't played it, Yokohama, Spirit Island, Lisboa, Barren Park, Wasteland Express Delivery Service, or Merlin. None of those are going to be on my top 10 list. I haven't played them. So that's the first thing you should know. If I do play them, there's a chance that they will jump on this list. I hope to play them at some point, and several of them are definitely contenders. Spirit Island, Yokohama, both for sure. We'll see what else happens. Another thing is I had four new to me this year games that are actually 2016 games that I wanted to mention that would have made my top 10 had they been 2017 games. And that's Dragoon, Medici the card game, Honshu, and King Domino. All four of those games are very, very good. I highly recommend them all. Honshu is in my quiver. King Domino and Medici are on my wish list. And Dragoon, I have the super fancy metal edition, and cannot wait for the expansion pack. So those are all 2016 games, however. So let's go to the 2017 games, and we'll start with honorable mentions. So these are the games that almost made my top 10 list. I didn't rank them, so they aren't in any particular order. They're literally just, these are the games that were almost good enough to make my top 10 list, or that I enjoyed enough to make my top 10 list. So those are Unearth, Clank in Space, Halloween, Skyward, Finished, Saikatsu, Photosynthesis, Fox in the Forest, and Noria. All of these games are good games. All of these games are games that I really enjoyed. All of these games are games that I either own or would like to own. I feel that this was a very good year for games. And the fact that I have well over 20 games on the list, once you include the four new to me games in this list of games that are honorary mentions, should make it pretty clear to you how good I think this year of games was. Like I said, Unearth, Clank in Space, Halloween, Skyward, Finished, Saikatsu, Photosynthesis, Fox in the Forest, Noria. I highly recommend all of them. They're very, very good games. They just didn't quite make it onto the top 10 list. So, now we're at the big moment. 3 minutes into the video, and we're going to start with the top 10 list. So, number 10 is Sagrada. Sagrada is designed by Daryl Andrews and Adrian Adamescu. It's gorgeous. It is basically dice Sudoku. It is really light, but has thinky elements because there's spatial reasoning to be had in it. There's a little bit of luck of the dice, however, it is dice drafting, and there are tools that exist in the game that will give you opportunities to sometimes work around dice luck. But it's a really quick, simple, fun, fast dice drafting game. This is another. This I like dice drafting. I really like Role Player. Role Player was released last year. I really like it. I got the expansion for it. It's a much heavier game. Sagrada is a much smaller bite of a game. Also, there's much more spatial reasoning rather than math reasoning. I think Sagrada is a lighter game in multiple ways, both in playtime and weight. And I think it's a really good one to introduce to newer players. I think a lot of people will be able to pick it up really quick, especially if they're familiar with things like Sudoku, number type puzzles, or even match 3 games. Even though there's no match 3 element, I think that kind of spatial logical reasoning would really lend itself to playing Sagrada. I think it's a really good game. I highly recommend it. Next is number 9, Clans of Caledonia. I played this game at BGG-Con. I watched hundreds of other people, it seems like, play this game at BGG-Con. It had a lot of buzz coming out of BGG-Con. I can't compare it to any of the games that it's been compared to. I've never played Terra Mystica. It has a really intelligent UI to it. First of all, it's sort of an area control game, sort of a I don't know, resource management game. It's not really worker placement. You are placing things on the board, but they're really to occupy territory and to declare that you have them active. Like, they don't do anything otherwise. It has a really clever user interface. It uses something very similar to Eclipse, where all of your pieces start out on your player board covering things up, and as you place them onto the main board, you'll uncover your new bonuses or your new effects. I really, really like that method of UI. I think it really lends itself to playing the game. There's very little information at first, and as you start getting into the game, you uncover more and more and get your bigger numbers or your upgrades. It's a really elegant way of handling that solution. The different clans that exist all play differently. They all have different strategies. In my playthrough, I was the whiskey making clan, which started fairly poor in the beginning of the game because they aged their whiskey. However, by the end, my aged whiskey meant that money was no obstacle. I had enough money to do anything I wanted for the last couple turns of the game, and that was a fantastic feeling. Being able to set myself up like that. All of the others have different abilities, all of which are useful, all of which skew your strategy slightly. This one would be higher on the list if I had played it more, I think. Only having one play-in kind of limited it. I want to explore it more. I do not have a copy. I do not know, or I'm not aware of anybody locally who has a copy. It's a game that I didn't purchase myself at BGG-Con simply because I wasn't sure who would play it with me. Because it's a longer game, not like a super long game, but a longer game. And I'm not getting an awful lot of table time right now, so Clans of Caledonia is a really solid game, and I want to play it more. But it's my number 9 on the list. Number 8 is a game that is a little bit harder to get a hold of because it does not have US distribution yet, but that is Kalimala. Kalimala is a worker placement game with a little bit of a twist, in that your workers go into a stack. So, you have a 3x3 grid, like a tic-tac-toe board, and when you place your workers, you place them between two of the squares, triggering both of those squares. What's really cool is that you can play on top of other people's workers. The trick, though, is that that person gets to activate those abilities again, and you get those abilities. If somebody places on top of the two of you, all of you get those abilities. The second a fourth person is placed, instead of triggering the abilities one more time for the first person who placed, so it'll go down to a stack of 3 from 4, and whoever was on the bottom, whoever the first person was placed will be placed into the top area of the board, which determines what scores next. And it triggers the scoring round immediately. So this means that the scoring rounds will happen periodically as players place their workers, rather than just being a constant set number of rounds. It's really elegant and really organic. It also means that you need to pay attention to what's scoring when, because building up a whole bunch of stuff and things that score later in the game is really interesting and could help you long term, but if everybody earns a ton of points before you even get to that part of the game, then you're kind of SOL. So you have to really pay attention to the order that things score in. You also have to pay attention to what everybody else does, because in addition to what's on the board scoring, there's a final scoring at the end of the game that's determined by the players. Everybody gets a face-down card and gets 2 face-down cards and picks one of the 2 for something that they want to score as well. There's a lot of decision space inside of this game. It is an area control game, pretty much. I love area control. I guess area majority, because first and second and stuff score, but it's really elegant, plays very quickly, has a very nice Euro-y feel to it. There's lots of thinking involved. Other players taking actions really affects how you play. And I really enjoyed it. I haven't heard anybody really say anything bad about this game. And again, it would be higher up on my list if I had played it more than I have. It's really good, like super solid game. This is one of those games that I could see becoming one of the classic Euro games that everybody recommends to everybody else. Excuse me. So that's my number 8, Kalimala. Number 7. Number 7, I was debating whether or not to include because it's kind of an expansion, but it's kind of its own thing. Since it introduces a whole new rule set, I decided to include it. And since it's my favorite rule set for this game, I felt I had to include it, and that's Codenames Duet. Codenames is a game that I absolutely love. It's probably my favorite party game. Sorry, Word Slam, you're fun, but my parties don't tend to be nearly large enough for that. Codenames, the original version, the competitive version, is a super fun game. Most of the time I played it with teams. Obviously, you have to have at least 2 people per team in order to play it that way. One person giving the clues to their other team member who is guessing, and then you kind of trade off back and forth. In Codenames Duet, you could actually play it with just 2 people, first of all. That's the first thing that's really exciting about it. The original Codenames had a variant that let you play 2-player. It was not as good as Codenames Duet. The Codenames Duet rule set is totally cooperative and really lends itself to 2-player play. It also lends itself to team play. There's absolutely no harm in having groups of people on either side working with each other. It's just that it's teams now working cooperatively instead of teams working competitively like in the original Codenames. It introduced a whole bunch of additional words that you can shuffle in with your original Codenames stuff to greatly expand what's available. It had as many words as the original Codenames, but they're all unique. It's a really great experience. I like it better than original Codenames, and I really like original Codenames. This one isn't as high on the list because this was a really good year for games, guys. I'm going to stress that again. Like, any game that I have mentioned today is a game that's probably worth owning if you like games of that type. They're all solid games. As a gaming omnivore, I kind of move around a little bit. So that was number 7, Codenames Duet. Number 6 is Otis. Otis is an action selection game with a very unique player board. You have a set of numbered tiles, which each correspond to an action in the center of the table. You also have your unique divers, each of which have a special ability. When you take an action, you slide your little number over, which pushes your little diver over. You get to take the action that the number gives you. You get to take the action that the diver gives you. Your number comes off your board, so you can't activate that space again, and the diver goes up to the top and slides everybody back down again. It's got some elements of action programming, even though it's not really a programming game. It is just an action selection game. Everything can be upgraded from the individual diver actions to how often you can recharge, to how far you can rearrange things when you use a battery, which will let you rearrange your divers. It is basically a racing for points game. You are trying to race to a score of 18 by gathering resources and completing contracts effectively. But the twist is that you can only complete the contracts with stuff on the row where those items have been collected. So you have to kind of do some thinking ahead of time on how to exactly make that happen. I really like this game. I want to play it more. I've only played it once, which is why it's not higher on this list, I think. Also, they just recently launched solo rules for it. It's a game that does not have a lot of player interaction. So Sagrada is a dice drafting game, and there's direct player interaction through the draft, but there's not any, like, take that elements. You can't mess up other people's boards. Clans of Caledonia, again, like, not a lot of direct player interaction. Like, you can influence the market that other players want to use. You can also do take territories that they wanted, that sort of thing. But there's no combat. You can't steal things from other players. Kalimala is much more player interaction-y in that you're playing in a shared resource board. And so there, like, you can go to some place before someone else can. It doesn't block them, but it could totally change their strategy because they aren't ready to score whatever will score just yet. Codenames Duet, again, is cooperative. There's interaction there, but it's of a different sort. Otis has almost no player interaction other than racing for particular contracts. And with one diver, you can actually specifically reserve contracts and just complete the ones that you've reserved instead of trying to complete the public ones. So, not a lot of player interaction there either. It's kind of a theme up to this point in the games on the list. And that there's definitely no take that in basically all of these. It's much more of a racing type of player interaction, or player actions change what you're going to do on your turn. Next on the list, number 5 is... Oh, number 6 was Otis, by the way, just to repeat that. Number 6 was Otis. It's a really, really fun game. I really like it. I want to play it more. I want to play it solo. I just need to own it first. Number 5 is actually a game I don't own. It's a game that I don't own. I'm sad that I do not own it. I think it is one of the most elegant games that I have ever seen, and that is Mini Rails. Mini Rails at number 5 is unbelievably elegant. It's very simple to teach, but inside of that is a whole depth of what you make your decisions based on. So every player, every turn, basically gets 2 actions. One action is to buy stock in one of the railroads, and one action is to lay track for one of the railroads. The difficulty is that every turn, all of the colors of disc will be laid out in a row in the center of the player board. When you take one of your actions, you will put your player piece where the disc of that color was, and then do with it whatever you chose. If it's a stock, you place it on your own personal player board, and then it can raise or lower in price as other people do things to affect it. If you choose to play it as rails, you place it on the main board, covering up a number which affects the stock, either raising or lowering it for anybody who already has that stock. So those are the things that you first have to consider is, am I taking this stock so that I can try to score it, or am I taking this and laying it as track so that I can change the value of this? Do I want to put all of my eggs in one basket? If it's clear that I'm going for a particular stock, is everybody else just going to put it on the board to lower the value of it so that it ends up either not scoring me any points or scoring me negative points? So you have to consider that with just those 2 actions. In addition, because your player pieces go where the discs are, that determines your turn order for the next round. So if I really want to get a white stock, say, and white is the last piece on the board, taking that white may be exactly what I want, but I have to temper that decision because that white will also mean that next round I go last. Does that mean that I want to take something earlier on the row in order to make sure that I have at least one early action and don't have a whole bunch of things change before I get to go? Or is it really worth it? In addition, there's always one piece extra that doesn't get claimed that becomes guaranteed, which means that that stock cannot go into the negative points. So that means that even if other people try to tank it, it won't harm me, it just won't help me. So do I leave that color, hoping that nobody else tries to piggyback off of me so that it can be guaranteed? It's a tough one, and there's all sorts of decisions that exist inside of that matrix. It's a fantastic game. It's a fantastic game that plays in like 30 minutes. Is really easy to teach, but the implications of your decisions are really, really deep and go very, very far. I highly recommend Mini Rails. It's really good. We're at the point of the list where I'm basically going to gush about everything that's left, so just be prepared for that. Number 4 is Favelas. Favelas is a game that I've seen developed on Twitter. I've seen it at Unpub in the wild, and Played the prototype version of it before it was officially published at BGG-Con. I was able to purchase the published version of it, and I've played it a whole bunch. It's one of the games that I purchased at BGG-Con that I have played the most since BGG-Con. It's a fantastic little game. It is a tile-laying game. You have a fixed size of board, and it is an odd number of squares. The interesting bit of this is that all of the tiles that you gain normally through the game that are draftable from a face-up draft are 2 squares, 2 cubes in size. So it never lines up perfectly. There is a stack of single square tiles that exist, but they're finite for the course of the game. Once they're out, they're out. And they're blind. So you could take them, but they may not be the color that you care about. This is one of those games where you are forced to pick and choose what you care about and what is going to score. The game has dice in the center of the board. However, they're only rolled 3 times in the course of the game to basically set the initial values for each round. After that, it's only player actions that change them. And what changes them is playing your tiles on tiles of the same color. You want to try to have majorities in colors that have really high numbers on their dice. You don't really care about the ones that have low numbers on their dice, but at the same time, those low numbers could become high numbers really quickly, and suddenly you're playing this game of tug-of-war. So every scoring in the game is a tug-of-war between you and other people. It's a tile-laying game where you could play just focusing on your board, but it's best played when you're paying attention to what everybody else is doing. Do I think I can snake red majority out from underneath the one of the other players? He only has 3. I already have 2. If I could get 2 more on my board, I could get 4, and maybe I could take that because red is now worth a lot of points. Or, that person has 5 reds. I'm just going to ignore red. I will let them have it. We'll hope that next round red is a really low number, or all of the other players are going to conspire together to make red worth less next round. Whatever it is, or even this round. But there's all sorts of interesting problems that are created by having a finite space inside of a tile-laying game. You can't hang over the edge. You can't grow your board unevenly. Everything has to be flat on a level. You can't tuck under. There's no undos or redos. Once you've done it, you're stuck with it. And it plays really quick, definitely less than an hour. I think you can play in half an hour quite easily with people who don't need to be taught the game, people who have already played. And it's a lot of fun. It can be, I don't want to say mean, because it's not really cutthroat. Like, you can deliberately, take tiles that you know other people want, or deliberately tank the scores of the colors that you know people want, but they can do the same right back to you, so you're not heavily incentivized to be mean. You can be mean, and sometimes the right decision is to be mean, but it's not always in your best interest, and I really like that. Again, it plays really quick, it's really easy to teach, and it has one of the funniest rule books I have ever read in my life. I highly recommend that you read the rules just to see how clever they are with their tiebreaker rules and their first player rules and everything. Really, really well done game. WizKids did a fantastic job with that, and Chris Bryan, the designer, did a great job with it as well. Any of the other designers who I did not mention on this list, I apologize. I didn't write everybody's names down. I should have. I just am going to mention it where I know it, but I wanted to get an apology in there. I'm not forgetting you. You guys have all made fantastic games, and most of you will be household names if you aren't already. So that was my number 4, Favelas. Number 3 is maybe going to be a little bit of a surprise to people, and that is Ex Libris. I think a lot of people will think this would be higher on my list, and it would be if there weren't 2 other games that slightly edged it out. Ex Libris is a game that I would play anytime. Absolutely anytime. I love it. It is it's a worker placement game and a tableau building game. but to below your building is a library, or at least a library shelf, and you're trying to alphabetize it, and you're trying to make it sturdy, and you're trying to uh, have the most popular books, and you're trying to have the least banned books, and you're trying to have the most books of a particular type that you personally care about. And all of these conflicting goals create a very interesting push and pull inside of your mind as you're playing. You know, this card has one of the books that I really care about, but it's on a letter that I really don't have a good place for yet. Do I hang on to it and just wait until I have a good place, or do I use it for a different reason? You know, do I discard it for one of the, you know, worker placement effects to try to get a better card that might fit in my library now? How many letters am I just going to give up on? Like, if I already have A, B, and C, and I have an H, am I just going to say, you know what? D, E, and F, and G, I'm just not going to worry about. You know, what do you write off? And it's one of those things where you have to make those decisions, and if you don't get enough cards on the table, and you lose. So it forces you into those tough decisions in order to play well. And I really love this game. The player powers that exist in the advanced version of the game are crazy bonkers. They seem like they should absolutely break the game in half and somehow don't. The you know, the worker placement aspects of it, where you have a certain number of places that you can place your workers each round, and then each round you keep one of them over into the next round, so the board slowly expands as the game goes on, is really amazing. It really, like, shrinks the learning time required for the game, because there's only so many places you can go. And nominally, what you want to be doing is drawing cards to find the good ones, and then shelving cards so that you can score them. And most of the rooms do variants of that. But your player board also lets you draw a card or shelve a card. So you're never stuck, even if the rooms aren't exactly what you personally want this round. It's just super clever. It's super fun. I played it as a prototype, and I loved it then. I demoed the crap out of it at Gen Con, and I loved it even more. I've played it a whole ton since Gen Con, and I still love it. Adam McIver did an amazing job designing this one. Renegade knocked it out of the park as far as everything goes. Jackie Davis did the artwork, and it's gorgeous. It's definitely one of my favorite games of the year, and it kind of surprised me that it did not make my number one as well, as much as I've been hyped about it. But I love that game. It's so good. Ex Libris. Number 2. My number 2 game of 2017 is also going to somewhat surprise people, because they may think it's higher, and that's Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes, by Stephen Sauer, is a light deduction game published by IDW, and I demoed the crap out of this game at Origins. But the story goes back a little bit before that. I've said this in other places, but I played the prototype version of it at Gen Con the night before it was signed, and fell in love with it instantly. I love deduction games, personally. Deduction games are my jam. I grew up on Clue. I grew up on Sleuth, when my dad got tired of Clue. So deduction games are something that I really love. And this game is light. It is a lighter game, but it is a deduction game that doesn't require you to write down a whole bunch of stuff. There's no pen or paper needed to track information, so you're not going to have that difficulty of screwing everybody else up. It has 2 endgame states where either you catch Furiarty and add up your points, or you don't catch Furiarty, and whoever has the least points loses. So I think it's very friendly family-wise. You know, if some people are stronger at deduction than others, they may pull the game to a successful conclusion, and that can be fun for parents, or for stronger players to try to make sure that they capture Furiarty, even if some of the other players aren't as strong at the deduction aspects yet. And at the same time, like, the deduction is not painful deduction. Like, there's not so much information that you're going to brain fry. There's a nice little player board that each player has that has all of the options listed on it so that you can try to logic it out. All of the cards are played face up except for the one that's facing away from you in front of you. All of that's information that you can use to try to help with your deductions. So I feel like it's a friendlier deduction game in a lot of ways than most deduction games are. And it's not as prone to things being screwed up, because if it's screwed up, it's because your logic screwed up somewhere, not because any of the information on the table was messed up. It's all there, it's all visible, it's all if you stop and take a breath, you can try to remember what it is you know at any point in time in the game, and that's a fantastic thing to have in a deduction game that's more entry level. I love this game. Again, Jackie Davis did the artwork. IDW published it. Steven Sauer designed it. This is a game that's going to be on my shelf forever. I plan on having it be my son's first deduction game. Even though I was raised on Clue, I don't have to do the same thing. I also have a copy of Sleuth, but Sleuth is not quite as entry level as this one is. And it's going to be fantastic to be able to share this amazing Victorian animal world with my son whenever he's old enough. And I really love the game. I'm totally charmed by it. Sherlock Holmes. So my number one game of 2017 is probably going to surprise some people. And there are some people, I think, who will say that it's because of the new hotness and the recent luster and everything, and that eventually it's going to lose its shine. But I really can't see that as a possibility right now, and that's Charterstone. Charterstone came out of nowhere for me. I knew of Stonemaier. Jamie's very vocal and very helpful to the community. And he's done a great job of getting all of his games to press, but I have only played one game published by Stonemaier Games, and that's Between Two Cities. I've never played Viticulture, I've never played Scythe, I've never played any of those. Charterstone was a relative unknown for me. I knew it was a legacy game. I knew it was a Euro game, which interested me and definitely was something that I was looking at. The art style is charming. Absolutely adorable, chibi-esque characters, and I really love that about it. It's very, very pleasant to look at. But myself and my gaming group went in on a copy from Essen and started playing it. We played our first game on a live stream. If you go to the One Tar, you can look up our first game of Charterstone. The only spoilers that are there are the ones that happen as we unlock stuff. We've played more games since then that were not live streamed. But I am in love with this game, and we play like once a week or once every other week, depending on when we can get together. And one of the things that I think about all week long is what's next, what's going to be unlocked, what rules are going to change, how it's going to be. I've played other Legacy games. I've played Pandemic Legacy. I've played Seafall. And while I liked both of those games, and I like Pandemic Legacy quite a bit. I love Pandemic. It was the game that kind of got me back into board games in the modern era, as it were. Charterstone just feels better to me. And I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what they did different. So in Pandemic Legacy, everything kind of carries over from game to game on the board, but each month introduces new conditions, and each game starts off like a new game of Pandemic. Seafall is the same way. Each game starts off brand new. Anything that you've done ahead of time goes away, but anything that's stickered to the board stays. Charterstone is similar in that everything goes away. But one of the things, and this isn't a spoiler, this is in the main rules, one of the things that exists is the ability to gain capacity to carry things over from game to game. And this is something that you unlock yourself as you play. There's various ways to unlock it. telling you how that happens is spoilery. But it means that while it starts off the same as the other games, where it's almost a fresh slate other than what's been stickered, you can start customizing your strategy over time from game to game and start building on yourself, almost like leveling up. It's a bit like a Rogue Legacy, as far as that goes. If you're not familiar with Rogue Legacy, it's a video game. It is a rogue-like game in that it's one death, you die, that's it. You don't go any further. But each time you restart, you get to keep any of the upgrades or various things that you've purchased from that point forward. So you die, you get out with all of your gold and stuff, you purchase upgrades. Every game after that, you're going to have those upgrades. This kind of plays a bit like that, in that over time you're going to acquire more things that you'll just get to keep from game to game. And it's based on your decisions, not just here's some stuff that you can have from game to game, enjoy. You choose kind of what you're keeping and what engine you're building and what you're stickering, and it's really, really satisfying. The game itself is not brain-burny. It's not a heavy Euro game. It's a fairly light worker placement game, but the overall decisions that you make and the engines that you build and the constantly shifting strategies based on the story are fantastic. It is probably the tightest Legacy game that I have played to date. Everything feels like it works together at all times. Things don't feel out of place. Everything that's been introduced has been has just slotted in like it was always supposed to be there. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if after all is said and done, we could continue playing on the final board that we create. I don't know yet. We're not done. But I can't wait to get to the next game so that we can be. This game came out of nowhere for me, only since Essen. The group that I'm playing it with is fantastic, which also helps. But there's so many things done right in this game that I couldn't imagine putting it anywhere else. Like, it's one of those things that became kind of all that I think about. The other games on this list are games that I would play at the drop of a hat. If anybody asked me to play any of these, I would be overjoyed and absolutely sit down to do it as long as I had, the time. But this game has occupied my brain space like none of the other games have. And so I felt compelled to put it at number 1. Do I think everybody's going to like it? Not necessarily. I don't think everybody's going to like any of the games on my list. Some of them are a little bit too tight. A lot of them are very Euro-y. Not a lot of luck in most of them. There are dice in several of them, but it's not traditional uses of dice for the most part. It's dice drafting, or the dice are used as score trackers. And yeah, those are the only 2 games that even have dice in them. Like, the majority of my list this year is fairly Euro, but it's all sorts of different weights. I found myself enjoying a lot more lighter games this year, and a lot more heavier games this year, branching out from kind of that mid-weight category as the year has gone on. So many good games this year, though, guys. So many good games. Like, any of the games that I have mentioned in this video are games that are worth playing. They're games that are worth owning if you like that type of game. Again, like, it's all good. And this list might change. Like I said, there are a lot of games from 2017 that I have not played. This was a year that was in a lot of flux. I moved across the country. Had to find a different gaming situation with a new group and a new city, and the conventions were a little bit different for me this year as I was flying in rather than driving. So it was different all around this year. My gaming existence was very different this year, but there were a lot of good games released, and I'm really happy with all of these games. The top 10 games on my list are just the games that are with me pretty much forever. Once I've acquired them, if I don't already have them, I can't see them ever leaving my collection. They're really, really good games, and I can't wait to get to playing them all again. Um, so to go through the whole list, the 2016 games that were new to me that I loved were Dragoon, Medici the card game, Honshu, and King Domino. The honorary mentions were Unearth, Clank in Space, Halloween, Skyward, Finished, Saikatsu, Photosynthesis, Fox in the Forest, and Noria. The top 10 in order. Number 10 was Sagrada. Number 9 was Clans of Caledonia. Number 8 was Kalimala. Number 7 was Codenames Duet. Number 6 was Otis. Number 5 was Mini Rails. Number 4 was Favelas. Number 3 was Ex Libris. Number 2 was Sherlock Holmes. And number 1 was Charterstone. I am going to be posting my list to Twitter. I'll be posting each game as its own unique entry. If it was one of the numbered ones on my list, the others will be grouped together as stated, since some people don't like watching 40-minute long videos. If you do watch the video, thank you guys. If you want to talk about anything on the list, or just games in general, or just life in general, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to talk. I love conversations. And, there's so many good games this year that I think the conversations about them are going to be going quite a bit into 2018 as we go. So, yeah, that's it for now, guys. Enjoy 2017 and all the wonderful stuff that it brought to us. And let's hope that 2018 is as good a year for gaming as 2017 was, because I plan on being there. And that's it. Bearded Rogue, out.